Today we are going to cover a new topic of the statistic, that is the graphical representation of the data. Before that, in the last lecture we have studied the mode of presentation of the data, collection of data, primary data, secondary data, etc. etc. This is just a new topic, that is the graphical representation of data. So what is the graphical representation of data? From the name itself, it suggests that the data are represented in the form of a graph. So what is graphical representation of data? The representation of the quantitative data through certain charts and diagrams is known as graphical representation of the statistical data. So you can say that the data which is already collected from either from the primary source or from the secondary source, now these data are arranged and they are presented in the form of a graph or charts or in the form of a diagram. So certain advantages as well as disadvantages are there of this graphical representation of data. So what are the different advantages of the graphical data? So it is easily to understand. So you can say that it is easily understood by all. समझने के लिए बहुत ही सादा है. By means of a glance you can easily understand the or represents the data. Next is that data can be presented in more attractive form. ये डेटा हमारे पास जो पहले न्यूमेरिकल फॉर्म में अवेलेबल है, अब उसे हम खूब ज़्यादा अट्रैक्टिव फॉर्म में अवेलेबल कर सकते हैं. सो इट इज़ यूजफुल टू डिटेक्ट मिस्टेक्स इफ़ यू हैव क्रिएटेड एनी टाइप ऑफ मिस्टेक्स दैट कैन बी डिटेक्टेड बाय मीन्स ऑफ द ग्राफिकल प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द डेटा. And it also shows the relationship between the two or more set of figures. We can find out the relationship between the two datas whichever it is given. So in between the two variables you can find out the relationship, and it also is very helpful in assimilating the data readily and quickly. By means of a glance you can easily assimilate the data. Next, coming up to the disadvantages, we have already seen there are many advantages rather than the disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of the graphical presentation of the data? It does not show all the facts. It does not show all the facts. सभी सच्चाई इस डेटा को सिर्फ देखने के बाद पता नहीं कर सकते हैं. We can reveal only the approximate position. So we are going to estimate only the position of the data, and it takes a lot of time. You need a paper, you need a graph, and then you have to plot it down. So it requires a lot of time. So these are the disadvantages. Next, coming up to the different types of diagrammatic presentation. So now the data is available to you, it is in your hand. Now you have to present the data. So how you are going to present it? So it can be presented in many ways. One of them is the line graph, another is bar diagram, next one is a pie chart, fourth one is a histogram, next one is a frequency polygon, and the last one, that is cumulative frequency polygon. So these are the different ways by which you can arrange the data. Now that is graphical representation of data. Normally it is based on the type of data, whether the data is group data or the ungrouped data. So your data, if it is ungrouped, then line graph can be represented. Data can be represented by means of the line graph, either by means of bar graph or by means of pie chart, and the pictograms. So these are the four ways by which we can represent the ungrouped data. And next is the group data. So here the data which is not a raw data, which is grouped into certain class intervals or frequency. So here we cannot apply the line graph, bar graph or pie chart. Here we have to apply the another method, that is said to be histogram. By means of histogram presentation we can show the data by means of frequency polygon and by means of frequency curve. So we are going to cover this topic one by one. So ungrouped data, you must know what is ungrouped data. So ungrouped data can be or of four types, that line graph, by means of line graph, bar graph, pie chart and pictorial view, by you can represent the data. So what is ungrouped data? When the data is in the form of a raw scores, means you have just collected the data either from the primary source or from the secondary source, but it is in the form of a raw material in your hand. So it can be represented by means of line, name itself says, by means of a line diagram, by means of a bar diagram. What do you mean by bar diagram? Bar is nothing but the rectangular box. By means of the pie diagram, by means of a circle or by means of pictogram. Certain pictures are used to represent the data. Next is, what is the grouped data? So when the data is organized, the raw data which is there in your hand is first organized, उसे क्लासिफाई किया जाता है या ऑर्गेनाइज किया जाता है डेटा को और उसके बाद उसे प्रेजेंट किया जाता है. सो दीज ग्रुप डेटा कैन बी प्रेजेंटेड आइदर इन द फॉर्म ऑफ हिस्टोग्राम, frequency polygon and the cumulative frequency. This is the three method by which we can graphically represents the data. Next is the line diagram. So it comes under the ungrouped data. So ungrouped data can be represented by means of line graph, or you can say that line diagram. Next is the bar graph. Third one is pie chart and pictogram. So today we are going to deal with the ungrouped data presentation. So line diagram or line graph. So you can say that from the name itself it suggests that certain line are represent or lines are presented to. Diagram is one of the common method of representing data, and normally it is practiced in the business and commerce field. Line diagram normally drawn on a plain paper by plotting concerning one variable on the x horizontal axis and other variable of the data on the y-axis, which intersect at a point called the origin. So you can find out there are two variables. एक वेरिएबल जो है x एक्सिस पे प्लॉट किया जाता है और दूसरा वेरिएबल जो है वो y एक्सिस पे प्लॉट किया जाता है और इंटरसेक्टिंग पॉइंट को कंसीडर किया जाता है. The data of the effect of practice on learning are given in a table. Considering दिस गिवन टेबल, अगर हमने ये गिवन टेबल को कंसिडर किया तो दिस टेबल इज गिवन द डेटा ऑफ इफेक्ट ऑफ प्रैक्टिस ऑन लर्निंग आर गिवन इन ए टेबल. इस टेबल में हमें प्रैक्टिस का लर्निंग पे क्या इफेक्ट होता है इस टेबल से हम कैसे फाइंड आउट कर सकते हैं. व्हेन वी यूज टू प्लॉट अ ग्राफ, प्लॉट ऑफ ग्राफ हम कैसे करेंगे. व्हेन वी प्लॉट अ ग्राफ, one variable taken on the x-axis and the another variable is taken on the y-axis. So consider this is the y-axis and this is the x-axis. So by means of the first point, that is trial number 1, so we'll plot the scores. We'll plot the scores on the y-axis. Here we will plot the scores. And here we will plot the trials. So that is trial variable is taken on the x-axis and score variable is taken on the y-axis. And after that, so how will you plot the data? The first one, that is 1. Here the score starts from 4 to 14. The score starts from 4 to 14. So we will start from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 in this way. And here also we'll mark an units right from the 1 to 9. So you can find out the smallest one, that is 1, and the largest one is 9. So it will start from the 0, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And then we will plot the point, that is 1 and 4. So 1 will be somewhere here and 4 will be somewhere here. So this is the first point which we will get. Next, that is 2, 5. So this is the second one and this is the fifth one. So this is the second point we will get. And then after that a line should be drawn. So this is a line graph diagram. So this is the table where we can find out the x variable as well as the y variable. Here we will label with the scores, and here we are going to label with the trials. So trial starts from 1 to 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this way we will plot till 9. And here it starts from 4 to 14. So the range should be from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, etc. etc. The points will be somewhere. First point will be 1 and 4. 1 and 4. This point will be here. Next is 2 and 5. Some will be here. Next points will be 3 and 8. 3 and 8. Some will be here somewhere. Next is 4th and 8. 4th and 8. Some will be here somewhere. Next is 5, 10. 5, 10. The graph, first the points are plotted and then they are joined. So this graph will show you the peak as well as how does as the number of trial increases, the score also increases. So it affects the learning. Next is the bar diagram. So what is bar diagram? It is the bars. Bars are placed horizontally. It is called the horizontal bar. So you can say that data are represented in the form of bars. In case of bar diagram, you can say that the data are presented in the form of bars. The bars can be represented by two ways. Either if they are represented horizontally, then it is said to be the horizontal bar, and if the bars are represented vertically, then they are said to be the vertical bars. These are the two different type of the bars. That bars can be later on colored. So it consists of number of equally spaced rectangular areas with equal width and originate from a horizontal base line x-axis. So it originates from the x-axis. It should neither be too short and should not be neither too long. And it may be vertical or the horizontal. So bar diagram where the data are represented in the form of bars. This is to be considered. It is of two types. Again, this bar diagram is of three types. This bar diagram is of three types. First one is said to be the simple bar diagram. First one is the simple bar diagram, where you can find out a table in which you can find out different subjects in which the student has scored the marks. So by just seeing the graph, you can say that the student has scored more in English subject rather than the maths, and the scoring of maths is considered to be low. So simple bar diagram, in this you can say that only one variables are considered. Here only one variable is considered, and the length of the bars determines by the value or the amount of variables. and the length you can find out here. The length is more. The length of the bar determines by the value or the amount of variables. As the amount varies, the length also varies. Here the variable is less, here the variable is more. So length depends upon the variables. This was regarding the simple bar diagram. So bar diagram is of three types. Simple. Next one is a multiple bar diagram. So in case of multiple bar diagram, it represents more than one type of data at a time. So you can find out two datas at a same time. So blue box or rectangle bar, you can find out it is of male, and the next one red bars, that is of the female. So here more than one or two variables are considered and they are plotted. The gap between the variables must be the same. This is to be considered. ग्राफ को ड्रॉ करते समय दो वेरिएबल्स के बीच का जो डिफरेंस होना चाहिए, that should be considered and also always should be same. So by means of the diagram you can find it out. In 2005 the female population was higher as compared to that of 2020, where it reduces. Next is the divided bar diagram, or you can say that it is the component subdivided bar diagram. So this is the last one, third one type of the bar diagram, that is subdivided. Means a rectangular bar is again divided into different components. So here you can say that a single bar diagram which represents the total, it is again divided into three different components. Next is the pie diagram. Pie diagram, it is a circular graph whose area is subdivided into sector. So you can find out it is a circular graph whose area is subdivided into sector by radii in such a way that the area of a sector are proportional to the angle of the center. So here you can find out different sectors are present, and this sector represents the percentage of a particular population or a particular variable. So the area of a circle is equals to the total value. So tomorrow after this lecture we are going to take few examples, and you peoples have to solve it and send me the answer. Thank you for listening. So tomorrow we are going to see how to calculate the pie chart. Thank you.